The sun had barely set when the shame began. In the center of the village square, where the elders usually gathered to drink palm wine and speak of harvests, a different scene unfolded. A young girl of 17, thin and quiet, stood with her head bowed, clutching the edge of her worn dress. Her stepfather, a tall man with a cruel mouth and a sharper tongue, dragged her by the wrist like one would a stray goat. "You will not sleep under my roof tonight," he barked, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. His voice carried across the dusty huts, drawing whispers from the shadows. "You think yourself too good for my rules? Then sleep with the beasts you are no better than." The villagers stirred uneasily, but no one dared to speak. Everyone knew the man's temper, and no one wished to be the next target of his wrath. The girl's stepmother, standing smugly behind him, folded her arms across her chest. Her eyes shone with satisfaction as if she had long waited for this humiliation to unfold. The girl kept her lips pressed shut, swallowing back the cry that trembled in her throat. She had already learned that her tears only fed her stepfather's cruelty. Instead, she let the silence fall over her, heavy and suffocating. The stepfather dragged her past the cluster of huts, past the central fire pit where children whispered stories of spirits, toward the pen where the goats bleated softly. The air smelled of hay, dung, and dust, the scent of animals not humans. He shoved her toward the small enclosure, his hand rough against her shoulder. "Here is where you belong," he spat. "Among creatures with no voice, no place, no honor. Perhaps you will find comfort with them." The girl stumbled inside, her bare feet sinking into the packed dirt floor. Goats shifted nervously, their heads lifting as they recognized a human entering their space. She sank down in a corner, hugging her knees to her chest, trembling as the night breeze chilled her ash-streaked skin. The stepfather lingered by the doorway, laughing cruelly. "Sleep well, silent one," he mocked. "Tomorrow the village will see you crawl out smelling of dung and shame. Then you will remember who rules your life." His words struck her like stones, but she did not lift her head. She let him leave, his laughter fading into the darkness. Only the soft bleats of the goats remained, their curious eyes watching her from the shadows of the pen. For a moment she wished she could disappear into the earth itself, sink into the soil and never rise again. Yet, as the stars flickered faintly above, she pressed her forehead to her knees and whispered a prayer no one would hear. A plea to her late mother, a call to the spirits that guarded the innocent. Around her the goats shifted again. One by one they settled in silence, not turning from her but facing her as if keeping vigil. Their steady eyes glimmered in the dim moonlight, unblinking, reflecting something strange. The girl shivered, but for the first time that night she felt she was not entirely alone. The night deepened, and with it, so did her shame. The young woman lay curled in the corner of the goat pen, the rough earth pressing against her bones, the smell of dung burning her nostrils. The goats moved around her, their hooves scraping against the ground, their low bleats carrying into the darkness. Every sound in the village reached her ears with painful clarity. She heard the laughter of boys by the fireside, the voices of women pounding grain, the quiet murmur of men playing their endless games. And above all, she heard her stepfather's voice, bragging loudly about how he had put the stubborn girl in her place. Her face burned hotter than the flame she could not see. She buried her head in her knees, wishing the earth would open and swallow her whole. Her mother's memory was the only thing that kept her breath steady, the memory of soft hands braiding her hair, of songs hummed at dawn. But her mother was gone, and in her place stood a cruel man who found joy in her suffering. Hours passed. The night grew colder. Her thin dress clung to her skin and she trembled against the chill. She tried to sleep, but the hardness of the ground pressed into her ribs, and every creak of the wooden fence jolted her awake. The goats, however, were not restless. They did not turn away from her as humans did. They huddled close, their warm bodies radiating heat. Their eyes shone in the faint silver of the moon, fixed on her with an intensity she did not understand. At first she thought it was her imagination. But no matter how she shifted, their gazes followed her. Unblinking. Patient. Knowing. A shiver rippled through her, though not from the cold. She whispered, half to herself, half to the night. "Why do you look at me so?" Of course there was no answer. Only a low bleat, long and drawn out, carrying into the darkness like a strange prayer. The girl pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the heavy thud of her heart. For the first time in many nights she did not feel mocked. She did not feel hated. The eyes of the goats, wide and shining, held no cruelty, only a watchfulness she could not explain. But in the distance, another sound reached her. Her stepfather, stumbling from the drinking circle, his voice raised in drunken anger. The words blurred, but she heard her name on his lips, cursed and spit into the night. The goats stirred at once. Their ears flicked, their heads turned, and every gaze left her to fix on the direction of his voice. The girl froze. A strange unease crept into her bones. One by one the goats began to rise. Not bleating, not moving wildly, but standing still in silence, their heads tilted, their eyes fixed beyond the fence. The air itself seemed to grow heavy, as though the night had drawn in a breath and was holding it. The girl clutched her knees tighter, whispering another prayer, but this time not only for herself. Because for the first time she felt the weight of something gathering in the air. Something her stepfather would not understand until it was too late. The next evening the stepfather staggered to the goat pen with his usual sneer. His steps were heavy with drink, his words slurred but sharp. "Still there, girl?" he barked, rattling the wooden gate. "You sleep better with beasts than with people. Perhaps their stink will teach you humility." The girl remained curled in the straw, silent, eyes lowered. She had learned long ago that answering him only brought more cruelty. But she was not the only one awake. As the stepfather leaned against the fence, laughing at his own cruelty, he noticed the goats were still. Too still. Not a bleat, not a shuffle of hooves. Dozens of eyes glimmered in the dim moonlight, unblinking, all turned toward him. He frowned and waved a hand. "Out of my way, you dumb creatures." The goats did not move. Their heads tilted, slow and deliberate, as though listening to something he could not hear. Their nostrils flared, but no sound came from them. Only their eyes, wide and glowing, locked on him with eerie patience. The stepfather shifted uneasily. "Strange," he muttered, scratching at his neck. "Animals don't look like that. They're just goats." But when he tried to walk away, he found himself glancing back again and again, to see if their gazes had shifted. They hadn't. Every single one remained fixed on him. That night as he lay in his hut, he could not sleep. He tossed, turned, grumbled at the heat. Yet each time he closed his eyes he saw them, the goats standing silent in the pen, their unblinking eyes burning into his skull. At one point he swore he heard them outside his hut. A rustle of hooves. A breath. A soft, low bleat stretched out like a whisper. He sat up sharply, sweat soaking his chest. "No. It's only the drink," he told himself. Only the drink. But when he peered through the cracks of his door he froze. In the faint glow of the moon he saw them. The goats, all of them, pressed against the wooden slats of the pen. They were not moving, not grazing, not sleeping. They were watching his hut. Watching him. His throat tightened. He slammed the door shut and lay back down, but sleep never came. The night pressed on, heavy and suffocating, until the rooster crowed. By dawn his eyes were bloodshot. His hands trembled as he splashed water on his face. "Just goats," he whispered. "Just goats." But deep in his chest, a fear he could not name began to coil. He had always believed animals were dumb, beneath notice. Yet something about the way they looked at him, silent, steady, knowing, stripped him of the certainty he clung to. And in the corner of the goat pen the girl sat quietly watching too. For the first time in many months, a flicker of something stirred in her heart. Not hope, not yet, but the faintest glimmer that the night itself was turning its gaze upon her stepfather. The second night was worse. The stepfather returned late, grumbling and reeking of palm wine. He staggered past the village square, muttering curses about ungrateful brats and weak animals. His lantern shook in his hand as he approached the goat pen. The goats were waiting. They stood in perfect silence, their eyes gleaming like shards of glass in the lantern light. Dozens of them, shoulder to shoulder, pressed against the wooden slats, staring. He sneered, trying to cover the sudden chill crawling over his back. "What? Waiting for her to sing you to sleep?" He spat on the ground. "Fools. You're only meat." But even as he said it, his voice cracked. The goats did not move, did not make a sound. Their eyes glowed steadily, fixed on him with unnatural patience. The girl sat in the corner of the pen, silent. She did not dare look at him, but she noticed the way his laugh faltered, the way he shifted his weight uneasily. That night, as he stumbled back to his hut, he could not shake the sensation that the goats were still watching, even after he turned away. When he closed the door behind him, the silence pressed in thick and heavy. No frogs, no crickets, no wind through the trees. Only his breath, ragged and uneven. He lay on his mat, staring at the thatched ceiling. Sleep would not come. Each time he shut his eyes, the vision returned. Dozens of eyes, wide and unblinking, staring into him until the air left his chest. His heart began to pound. Sweat poured down his temples. He sat up, gasping for air. Then he heard it. A sound, soft and steady. Hooves against the dirt. Slow, deliberate steps circling his hut. He froze. His ears strained. The steps stopped. Silence. Then came a low bleat. Drawn out, mournful, almost human. The stepfather's throat tightened. His hand fumbled for the lantern, but his fingers shook too violently to strike the flint. He sat there, clutching it to his chest, staring into the dark. Hours passed like that. Each time he thought the sounds had gone, another would come. A scrape of hooves, a breath against the wall, a faint rattle of the pen's wooden gate. By dawn he looked like a man who had wrestled with a ghost. His eyes were hollow, his face pale, his lips dry and cracked. When the girl emerged from the goat pen that morning, the villagers noticed her stepfather's trembling hands, the way his chest rose and fell too quickly. Some whispered that the drink was finally eating him alive. But she knew better. She had seen the way the goats shifted in the night, not toward her but toward him. She had seen how their eyes glowed brighter when he came near. For the first time, a strange calm settled over her. Perhaps the ancestors had not abandoned her after all. Perhaps they had found new messengers, soft-footed and horned, waiting in the pen. And as the stepfather staggered through the day, unable to shake the feeling of eyes on his back, the goats stood quietly, chewing their grass. Yet when he dared to glance their way, they always paused, their jaws still, their eyes fixed. Watching. Always watching. The third night came heavy with heat, the air thick and restless as if even the sky was waiting. The girl curled in the corner of the goat pen, her body sore but her spirit oddly steadier than before. She whispered silent prayers into the straw. Though she had no words to comfort the goats, their closeness gave her strength. Her stepfather returned again, this time sober, carrying a switch in his hand. He had grown restless, snapping at neighbors during the day, barking at children who dared cross his path. Sleep had not touched him since the goats began their silent watching. When he neared the pen, his steps slowed. The goats were waiting. Again. Their heads turned in unison, horns catching the moonlight, eyes glimmering with a pale, steady glow. Not a single bleat, not a shuffle of hooves. Only silence, stretched taut as a rope ready to snap. "Move!" he barked, slapping the switch against the wooden posts. The sound cracked the air, but the goats did not flinch. They only stared. He tried to laugh, but the sound came hollow, brittle. "You think I fear animals? You think eyes can break me?" His voice rose too quickly, echoing into the night. "You're beasts, nothing more." Still the goat stared. He took a step back. His chest tightened suddenly as if invisible ropes had wrapped around his ribs. He gasped, clutching at his throat. His breath came in short bursts. No, not out." He staggered, wild-eyed, as though the weight of their gaze pressed the very air from his lungs. His knees hit the dirt. The switch fell from his hand. Inside the pen, the girl sat frozen, watching him. For once, his cruelty melted into something raw, something weaker than fear, helplessness. The goats shifted then, not much but enough. A ripple moved through them, a single coordinated step forward. Their eyes gleamed brighter, and with it, his breath faltered even more. Stop looking at me," he croaked, his voice breaking. He turned his head, trying to escape their gaze, but everywhere he looked, more eyes waited. Round, unblinking, merciless. He clawed at the dirt, dragging himself backward, but the goats pressed forward again, not rushing, not charging. Only stepping with dreadful calm, as though each movement was measured by something older than men. His hands shook violently. His chest heaved, searching for air that would not come. His mouth opened wide, gasping, but the breath caught short, stolen by the weight of unseen judgment. "Enough," he choked out, his voice cracking like dry wood. "Enough." The girl rose slowly, gripping the slats of the pen. She looked at him, this man who had broken her, who had driven her into filth and humiliation. For the first time his power was gone. "Father," she whispered, her voice trembling. Not with fear but with a strange mix of awe and sorrow. At her word the goats froze. Their hooves stilled, their stare unbroken. The stepfather collapsed onto his side, gasping desperately, his body shaking. The air returned to him, ragged and shallow, enough to keep him clinging to life. But he could not move. His chest rose and fell in jagged spasms, his eyes wide with terror. The goats slowly turned back toward the girl, surrounding her protectively. Their eyes softened, as if acknowledging her, as if waiting for her to understand what power now walked with her. The stepfather lay trembling in the dirt, clutching his throat, unable to rise. His face was pale, his lips cracked. For the first time he looked small. And she, covered in straw and the scent of goats, felt something stir deep within her chest. The shame he had forced upon her began to shift slowly, painfully into something else. Something unbreakable. Above them, thunder rumbled. The storm that had lingered on the horizon finally broke. Rain lashed against the roofs, wind howled through the trees, and thunder rolled like a drum of war. The village huddled inside their huts, whispering about the cries they had heard from the goat pen the night before. But no one dared come near. Inside the pen the girl lay awake. Her body was weary but her mind sharp. She could feel something shifting, like the air itself carried a secret too heavy to ignore. The goats pressed close, their warmth steady against her chilled skin. Her stepfather had not returned to the pen since collapsing in the dirt. He had stumbled home, coughing and clutching at his chest, but sleep never came to him. Neighbors said they heard him pacing, muttering to himself, spitting curses that sounded less like words and more like the ramblings of a broken man. By midnight he returned. The girl heard his footsteps before she saw him, uneven, dragging. The pen door creaked open and he stood there, soaked with rain, eyes hollow as if the storm outside had carved its way into his very bones. "You," he rasped, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You did this to me. You and those cursed animals." His voice cracked, trembling with rage and terror. The goats stirred, heads lifting. One by one their eyes fixed on him again. In the flicker of lightning their stares burned bright, more alive than any flame. "No," he screamed, stumbling backward. "Not again." But the goats didn't move toward him. They didn't need to. Their stillness was heavier than any blow. The silence between thunderclaps grew suffocating, pressing down on him until his knees buckled. The girl rose, standing in the straw. For the first time she felt no fear in his presence. His threats, his beatings, his endless cruelty, all seemed small now, swallowed by the weight of the night. "Why do they look at me?" he gasped, falling to his knees. Rainwater dripped from his chin, mixing with the dirt. "Why won't they stop?" His voice cracked into a sob. "I can't breathe when they look at me." The goats stepped forward in unison, hooves thudding softly against the wet ground. Their eyes gleamed with a strange, steady light. The air thickened. The girl's voice came quietly, steady, though she barely understood how it left her lips. "Because they see you." Her stepfather froze. "They see what you've done," she continued, her words trembling but strong, "to me, to my mother, to this house. They see every cruelty you buried in silence." The goats moved closer, their circle tightening. Their eyes pierced through him like spears of truth. His chest heaved as if invisible hands gripped his ribs, squeezing tighter with every heartbeat. "No," he cried again, clawing at the air. "I am the master here. I am." His words broke into a choking cough. His body convulsed. He tried to crawl away, but the goats pressed forward once more, their stares unrelenting. The girl didn't move. She didn't need to. The goats spoke for her in their silence, their judgment written in their gaze. The stepfather collapsed face first into the mud, gasping for air that refused to come. His fingers clawed at the ground, scraping the dirt, leaving long desperate marks. His eyes bulged, his mouth open in a silent scream. The goats stood still, watching, waiting. Then it ended. The storm's thunder rolled far into the distance, as though carrying his last breath away. He lay motionless in the dirt, eyes glassy, his chest no longer rising. The girl sank slowly back to the ground, her body shaking. The goats lowered their heads, surrounding her protectively, their warmth pushing against her like a shield. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt safe. The storm outside began to ease. The rain softened, the wind stilled. But in the silence she knew one truth: the goats had not just defended her. They had judged him. And their judgment had been final. Dawn broke slowly, the sky bruised with streaks of red and gray. The storm had passed, but the earth was heavy with rainwater, the ground soft and black beneath bare feet. The girl sat in the goat pen, her knees pulled to her chest. The goats rested around her, their calm breathing steady, as if nothing extraordinary had happened in the night. Yet the mud at the entrance of the pen told another story. The shape of a man collapsed, dragged halfway inside before life had left him. By morning the first villager came. A boy fetching water noticed the body and ran screaming into the square. Soon men and women gathered, their voices rising in alarm. "It's him, her stepfather," one shouted. "He's dead," another whispered, spitting over their shoulder to chase away bad spirits. The elders arrived, leaning on their carved staffs, their faces carved with caution. They looked to the girl, sitting silent among the goats, and for the first time no one laughed at her. "What happened here?" one elder demanded. The girl said nothing. She only raised her eyes, swollen from sleeplessness, and let them wander to the goats. The animals stood in a row, their eyes fixed on the villagers. There was no malice in their gaze, but there was something else, something that made the strongest men avert their eyes. Whispers rippled through the crowd. They say the goats killed him. No, she cursed him. Or maybe, the goats only revealed what he truly was. The stepfather's body was carried to the edge of the square, but none dared bring him to his home. Even in death, fear clung to him. His mouth was frozen open as though still trying to suck in a final breath. His eyes, wide and staring, reflected the terror of the night. The stepmother pushed through the crowd, her wails piercing the air. She fell upon his body, clawing at his chest, shaking him as if he might wake. But when her eyes fell upon her stepdaughter in the goat pen, her grief twisted into fury. "You did this," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger. "You bewitched him just as you bewitched this house." The villagers stirred uneasily. Some muttered in agreement, but others shook their heads. "No," one elder said firmly, his gaze heavy. "I have seen the marks. This was no witchcraft. This was judgment." "Judgment?" the stepmother spat. "By who?" The elder pointed with his staff, not at the girl but at the goats. "The animals have eyes sharper than ours. They see what we ignore. If they turned against him, then it was because he deserved it." A hush fell. The villagers shifted, uncomfortable with the thought. Goats were ordinary creatures, raised for milk, for meat, for trade. But now, staring into their still and watchful eyes, no one dared call them ordinary. The stepmother's rage faltered. Her gaze darted from the girl to the animals and back. For the first time she seemed afraid, not of her husband's death, but of the living. That evening, the village women came quietly to the goat pen. They brought the girl food, wrapped in banana leaves, and placed it at her feet without speaking. Their eyes carried a strange mixture of pity and reverence. "She is not to be touched," one of them whispered. "The goats protect her." And so, the story spread. By nightfall, the whole village knew. The man who forced his stepdaughter to sleep in the goat pen had been watched, judged, and silenced. The goats had chosen their side. And no one, not even the elders, dared question it. The days that followed her husband's death were heavy with unease. The village carried on. Fields were tilled, fires were lit, drums echoed at dusk, but every path bent away from the goat pen. The girl remained there, living among the animals as if she had always belonged. Her stepmother, however, walked with bitterness carved into her face. Where grief should have been, only anger remained. She could not bear the way the villagers now looked at her stepdaughter, not with scorn as before but with caution, even respect. "She is no child," the stepmother hissed to anyone who would listen. "She is a curse in flesh." The goats only made her stronger. But fewer and fewer people agreed with her. Fear had shifted the balance. Mothers pulled their children close when she spoke, not out of sympathy but unease. Men avoided her gaze. The elders gave her no answer. And so, left alone, her rage hardened into desperation. That night, she sat before the cold ashes of her hearth, whispering to the darkness. "You took my husband. You will not take my home. I will end you, child. Even if I must drag you myself into the earth." She rose before dawn, carrying a bundle of charms wrapped in red cloth. The old root doctor from another village had whispered the instructions to her long ago. Charms meant to silence, to banish, to strip protection away. Moving like a shadow, she crept toward the goat pen. The girl was asleep, curled in the straw, a goat's head resting gently across her legs. The rest of the animals stirred as the stepmother approached, their soft breaths turning into low hums. Their eyes opened, glowing faintly in the moonlight, all of them staring at her. But the stepmother did not stop. She knelt in the dirt, scattering powder in a circle, her lips muttering, "By ash, by thorn, by blood, unbind her. Strip her of the beast's gaze." The goats shifted uneasily, their bodies pressing closer to the girl. She stirred, waking slowly, her eyes widening as she saw the stepmother crouched at the gate. "Stay away," the girl whispered, her voice barely steady. The stepmother snarled, "You've bewitched them. But tonight I break you." She hurled the last of the powder toward the pen. It hung in the air like a black cloud before falling onto the goats' backs, clinging to their fur. The goats did not scatter. Instead they rose as one. Their heads turned toward the stepmother, their eyes shining with a strange, terrible light. The ground seemed to tremble beneath their hooves. "No, no," she cried, stumbling back. "It is you. She cursed you, not me." The goats advanced, slow and deliberate. Their eyes never blinked, never wavered. The girl rose to her feet inside the pen, clutching the wooden slats for support. Her voice shook as she called out, "They see you, stepmother. They see everything." The stepmother screamed, hurling the empty cloth at the animals as if it could protect her. She turned to run, but the goat's stares held her frozen. Her chest heaved, her breath rattled like dry leaves. "They're watching me," she shrieked, clawing at her own throat. "Make them stop." But the girl only shook her head. The goat's eyes seemed endless, rows upon rows of dark mirrors, reflecting every cruelty the stepmother had ever hidden. Her legs buckled beneath her. She fell to the ground, gasping, her voice fading into hoarse whimpers. The villagers woke to her cries. They emerged from their huts, carrying torches, gathering in the square. What they saw silenced them. The stepmother collapsed before the goat pen, her hands clawing at the earth, her body shuddering under the weight of invisible judgment. The girl stood just behind the goats, her face pale but steady. She did not speak. She did not need to. By dawn, the stepmother lay still, her eyes wide open, her lips parted as though her final breath had been stolen. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some said the goats had cursed her. Others claimed the ancestors had chosen the girl as their vessel. But all agreed on one truth: the goat's gaze was not to be challenged. And so, the stepmother's body was buried without song, without prayer, at the farthest edge of the village, where no goat would ever set its eyes upon her again. Inside the pen, the girl sat once more, silent and trembling. The goats pressed close around her, warm and unyielding, their eyes fixed on the horizon. It was no longer a question of survival. It was the beginning of something far greater, something the village could not yet name.